Any removals?
And President LaHue, I'd like to make a statement that there actually is going to be a will serve, 2 will serve items. It says there are no will serve items on the agenda, but it was considered an urgent item, so it's being added later. The items are on the back of the table, so if anybody wants to see them, but they're your typical will serve, and there's allowance for that in the procedures, the statutory
Okay, so we will
requirements.
take those up when we get to item 6.1. Okay, thank you. All right, so any public comment on the consent agenda? Seeing none? Hi. Dr. Jaffe is here.
Maybe I pulled
Any motions on the consent agenda?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Great. Oral communications, so this is the time if anyone wants to speak to the board on items not on tonight's agenda, this is the time.
I'm Terry Thomas. I live at 516 Park Avenue. We have 3/4 of an acre. A quarter of it is in orchard. I've had 20 fruit trees. I'm down to 15 and a half. I don't like being made to feel like I've done something wrong, and I'm sorry to have to be here. But I came to take issue with your new billing regime. I urged my husband to drive home Friday from Oregon a day early after a long working trip in order for me to pay our bills on the 1st of the month. What a shock to find a collections agency type phone message waiting for us from you, saying that in order to avoid late fees, we must pay our bill by 5 p.m. Friday the 31st. Really? Nice welcome to your brand new system. The bill you had sent was postmarked May 15th, so we would have received it the 17th or 18th. That gives your captive customers less than 2 weeks to turn around to pay you. The law requires you give us 3 weeks, and we all know the post office isn't what it used to be. Most people get paid on the 1st and the 15th of the month, the same with us. I do not pay bills until the money is in hand, and we don't remit other ways or give out credit card information after suffering identity theft 4 times. We leave town for extended periods of time, happy to save water for you. So we consider this newly imposed late fee a slap in the face for our efforts to conserve. You will already be making plenty off your new tier structure and rate system, and you know we have no other water provider options. As a 47-year customer, we've never had or seen a late fee from you. This draconian instant demand by your new billing operation is a surprising change and most uncalled for. I strongly urge you to change this policy to be more flexible right away. If you mail out your bills on the 15th, then make them due by the 5th. You will then be giving your customers legally sufficient time to comply. And I'm sure I'm not alone in this.
Thank you.
Sorry to have to be here to say.
No, I understand. I actually want to ask a question about that. So I do think most bills from
Our
other,
bills have always been due 3 weeks after the date the bill is issued, so that hasn't changed.
okay,
What has changed is we did send out a phone notification 2 days before the due date to let people know that that due date was coming up, because with the new collections regulatory law, SB 998, we have changed that collection timeline a little bit. We're not doing the $25 late fee anymore. It's been lowered to $10, and it does take effect at the 3-week mark. So the call was a courtesy call just to let them know that that was coming up in the next couple of days. So we have had customers a little bit confused about the new payment system actually lets them go on and select the date they want to pay their bill, and not all of them are aware that the date they're selecting to pay is after the due date of the bill. So we're having to work through this process a little bit with them, but we have extended a 3-month grace period. We actually won't, we'll be waiving any late fees. If you were to incur a late fee, you could call in anytime between now and September, and we'd go ahead and waive those.
I've never received a late fee, and I've always paid my bills the 1st or 2nd of the month, and
So
I've never
thank
heard from you at all.
thank you. we got your comment, and I actually think from going through the software system myself and signing up to pay a bill, I think it's somewhat cumbersome. And so I think it's good if we have a little,
Grace
slack
period.
and a little grace period,
Yeah,
for people, so
are
know that
giving
you have that
3
grace
months.
period, and that maybe, we need to help people through the idea that they can set their own due date and that kind of thing. So I actually thought it took forever to sign in, and it was not very, intuitive.
Okay.
Just, I don't know what we can do to improve that, but that was my experience. So you will have a grace period for sure. And I understand people don't want to have, the idea of a late fee, just, you're trying to always pay your bills on time. I know it upsets people, so I'm the same way.
And the bill does now have, on the face of it, it has on there a paid before amount and a paid after amount. So it gives you the amount if you pay before the due date and the amount if you pay after the due
So it
date.
sounds like we're still working out some of the bugs, but you'll be okay.
But that was a shock, it was the first new bill.
Right. Should be better.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Any board comments?
It makes me feel better. The same thing happened to me.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
it's not just,
The transition.
Yeah.
random customers. I got the same thing.
Anyone else? Bruce. And then Bruce.
Bruce and Bruce. So last night I was at the Santa Cruz Water Commission meeting, and two things of import. One was that the agreement for secondary effluent and the building of the tertiary plant at the wastewater treatment facility is not going to be going to the city council on the 11th as initially expected. And the reason for this is there were some immediate concerns from members of the Water Commission when they read what the agreement was. And what happened last night was that they agreed to recommend in concept the secondary effluent,
Or
Being-
not tertiary? Or,
well,
okay, and building
secondary
plant.
to the tertiary plant, and then it'd become tertiary.
Got it.
And there's a subcommittee, Doug Engford, David Baskin, and Lindo, what's her last name?
Houser, yeah. Yeah, she's on the commission.
Are on this subcommittee, and they're gonna be making changes to it over the next week. Cause that's when it has to, the item's now been pushed to the 25th for the city council. And it's not gonna be an agreement, it's gonna be another MOU. Because they don't have, they weren't able to recommend it as an agreement. Because it wasn't, there were things that needed to be changed.
But once it's changed, it will
Well,
be considered an
so
agreement?
there's timing here. So they will recommend this MOU to the city council informally, but they don't have a meeting between now and the 25th. So they can't formally recommend it. You can chime in. Ron and Melanie were there as well.
Yeah, I think that's a fair description. I think there was some confusion about whether MOU or an agreement, and, because it says agreement at the top, actually, but Doug Emfer was asking about that. So the concept is we've already turned back around another issue, thanks to help with Bob Basso today. We'll be meeting with them on Thursday to get all their comments. Apparently David Baskin had quite a few kind of logistical comments, some, working for holistically, I think, for both sides, all the way around. And then we'll see where we arrive then, and the aim is to get it on the agenda for approval at the Water Commission at the city council meeting on June
25th.
20th,
25th.
25th.
25th, okay, 25th.
Yeah.
Exactly what it's MOU, MOA, we gotta have some discussion around that.
The city staff and us have had some discussions today just about how we're going to be bringing together the comments, both from the city as well as the district. We also have comments related to the draft. Our comments were sent over to the city. Their attorney made some edits. We have some additional edits that we're going to be bringing on Thursday. And one of the items is to discuss. It is going to be called a project agreement. And with this agreement, there's still the forthcoming operations and maintenance plan, which I think in terms of some of the more contractual items that the Water Commission was inquiring about will be addressed in that. And that is, again, something that our team and their team are working on to still be coming, within the fall. So I think to address, I know Dr. Daniels had some concerns related to whether it was an MOU or an agreement. This is an agreement that is something that we can go forward with in our project development. I think the one thing that I wanted to point out just from yesterday in terms of the comments was the other additions that the Water Commission wanted us to add was more inclusive language related to their interest in reuse. And we were light on that in the agreement, recognizing that they are still evaluating maximization of taking water off of the streams and rivers and how much they wanted to put in the agreement. But the water commissioners last night really voiced that that is part of their portfolio and they wanted to put that in there. So I think that's some other additional language that they're going to provide.
Yeah, and I'll add, I think the sentiment was that, at least it was voiced by Linda, but I think it was true to all, it seemed like that they want the facility down there, and they think that they may have need for some sort of recycled water in the future, and that will be a benefit to them. Even there was spoken out by Linda that the Chanticleer site is, she thought, the appropriate site. So I think it's logistics, maybe a business point or two on the agreement. We haven't been privy to exactly what those were, but we need to sit down with them on Thursday.
Okay.
So just to follow up, so it sounds like there's been more going on than what was voiced last night. So I'm glad to hear that it'll be called an agreement. But that they, at one point, were gonna just table it till their next meeting. So it was a good thing, it's not optimal, but they realize the timeline that we have and are having special, this special, subcommittee working on it. So
Yeah.
I personally am thankful that they're doing that.
Yeah, it was I think I'll phrase it another way. It was very generous that at least they were willing, 3 of the commissioners, to form a subcommittee to work this out, to get it, to be able to make it to the council in June, because they go dark July and they don't meet again until late August. So that was the
Sure.
push, and they recognize that. And as Dr. Jaffe said, they were thinking of table it, and they were able to accommodate us after the 3 of us went up and spoke to the item.
Well, I will
And they
thank-
voted 5-0. The vote was 5-0 to recommend to bring it to the council on the 25th, which supported the Public Works Commission vote that was late last month as well.
Well, thank you both for going, and Bruce, thank you for going too. Appreciate it.
So is this 3-person subcommittee been given the complete discretion to approve it on behalf of the Water Commission?
Yeah, or deny it, or make it not go forward, either way. if
Yes,
they can't
but
get
they've
there.
got,
Yes, they
they've
got that
gotten
sole
full
discretion.
authority to deal with it.
Discretion. And I'm sure we'll be working hand in hand. There's already been lots of phone calls.
Given it's had some changes, it's going to have some changes made to it. Does it have to go back to the Public Works Commission?
We don't believe so, but that does bring up the point that maybe I could work with a few of y'all independently, not together, but also we could bring it back to this board on our
The-
next meeting.
on the
If
18th.
you'd like to see that in,
Well, I was going to suggest, it's, the agreement, draft agreement,
Mhm.
is online. It was in the agenda for the
Right.
Water Commission last night. And the original plan was, it was going to go to the Public Works Commission, then the Water Commission, then the council, and then it was going to come to us.
exactly,
And which means we couldn't change it, because if we
Right.
changed it, it would go all the way back and
Right.
we'd lose out. So I recommend everybody take a look at it. For example, I took a look at it, and one of the clauses that has trouble for me is there's a clause in there that says, the city has the rights and the powers to, in the future, undisclosed what future means,
Yeah,
to buy it
buy
out
back.
from under us.
yeah. And we
Which
think,
means that we could get this thing started.
With 1 year notice.
Yes, we could get it started, and a
But
year
that-
later, they could buy it out from us, and then they may not have any requirement to give us water, because,
And that was one of the things that actually David Baskin
okay, good.
pointed out, that he thought that wasn't a good thing for us.
That's a good thing, right, yes.
and I'll say that this, we've been working on this for about, I don't know, 6, 8 months. And the rendition that was even shown wasn't the rendition we had, so it's probably good that we have a little more time with it, because I don't think that was in the original agreement. I think there was after a 30-year stint that sort of thing happened. But anyway, I do think at this time it's prudent, and Bob, correct me if I'm misstepping, but what we could do is when we get it to a place, because there's gonna be some major revisions to what you saw last night, maybe it's the end of this week or early next week, I send it out to them individually and work with the board. Could I do that individually for their comments, only back to me, and then we bring it back to the board on our next meeting?
Or create a subcommittee.
Or we could form a subcommittee,
That's what I was wondering.
okay? 2 people, that might be better.
It might be better to form a subcommittee. You
Okay.
could just get comments directly back,
Uh-huh,
and you put them in whatever fashion you want,
Yeah.
but that may be more difficult than a subcommittee.
yeah.
Ad hoc or whatever.
Yeah, an ad hoc committee, so, can they appoint a, can they appoint a temporary
Ad hoc,
ad hoc committee here now? Okay.
any,
At what point during the meeting do we do that?
we can-
You can do it at any point you want. I mean, that's just, president could do that if he wanted to
Right.
without even having a meeting.
Right, so I mean, so should we do it that way rather than a vote? Okay, well then, who would like to be involved? Bruce,
I don't have to be, go ahead.
Do it,
you want to?
make Bruce.
Right.
It's 2 people.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm willing, but if you want to do it, Carla, that's fine.
Well, you guys have I don't care.
I don't have the experience that Rochelle, do you have? No?
Not really.
Okay.
Okay, well then, is it okay for Bruce and I then?
Sure,
Check.
sure.
Okay.
And I'll send you out an email. I'm anticipating it won't be till Friday that it'll be worthy of you to look at. But we'll send out an email with a when we can meet.
It's like
We
a
can-
6-day,
And then we can do both,
6
though.
days.
We can still have other
Yep.
people send in comments once there's things available, but.
And then we can have a formal discussion of it at the next board meeting.
Right, and we'll bring it back to the next board meeting, and Melanie, say what you just said when we,
it's about a 6-day duration
yeah,
between the time that we're trying to get the agreement ready to go to the council.
Okay,
so we'll be working within that
Right.
timeframe.
and no need to go to the meeting next Tuesday night.
No.
Right, right.
Okay.
And the second thing that was of note was I stayed to the end of the meeting. I wanted to talk with people afterwards. And they're talking about what comes next after the WASAC process. And I was happy to see that climate change was very big on it was on their minds. And so they are going to be putting a lot of effort into perhaps different ways of looking at climate change and paying more attention to what that does with river flow.
Great,
So I think it's a step in the right direction.
good. And thanks again for you all going. Bruce, you had some other comments?
Yes, and the thing we're going to talk about tonight, which is the triennial report on public health goals, one of those for the city was also on their agenda. And it's kind of interesting to look at theirs, and I think we got 4 things on our list. And theirs went on for like 3 or 4 pages. It was just
Sure, with
page after
surface
page after page of, constituents that they've detected that, fall into those categories. So, again, their water is partially treated sewage water that comes out of the river. So, anyway, it makes interesting reading comparing to ours. The last thing I wanted to mention is there was a article in Friday's newspaper, front page of the Sentinel, about a celebration going on down in Pajaro. It was the 10-year anniversary of their recycled water project. And there was something that Zach said down there, which I think is really quite relevant to us.
Supervisor Zach Friend?
Zach Friend, yes. And I'll read you, it was at the very end of the article, and he says, the subtitle for this was Model for County, State. Santa Cruz County Supervisor Zach Friend, who represents parts of Watsonville in areas north, commended water agency employees who are setting the stage for conservation and sustainability for both the county and state in the facing of climate change and continuing development. New paragraph. Friend said that water customers in areas such as the nearby Soquel Water District are continuing to debate the merits of recycled water use. In Soquel Creek Water District, where elected leaders have approved a project to build separate components of an advanced purification treatment plant at the Santa Cruz Wastewater Treatment Plant and in Live Oak, recycled water would be piped into ground to replenish groundwater supplies rather than limited to agricultural irrigation. The new paragraph. The fears that were down here that were expressed by the growers when we first came into office were the exact same things I'm hearing in Soquel Creek, Friend said after the event. So I could consider it a model that could be used. I've got people in my district that are eating produce from something that they're also fearing drinking water from and not seeing the correlation. And in fact, the stuff they're putting on the ground and growing crops with there is only tertiary, and we're talking about purification. And so it's true, a lot of people don't realize they're already eating food, both from Pajaro and from Monterey County, that's done with tertiary. And
Not advanced purification.
yes, and of course, they're putting that stuff on the ground where the crops are, and it's soaking into the groundwater. So again, people who complain about this just ignore the fact that, it's happening down there and no one cares, or seems to.
Of course, I think we continually have been reminding people that tertiary water that we were trying to get this agreement to purchase is tertiary water, and it is approved for use
Yes.
of organic farming.
Yes, yep,
And
It's
playing
not that we
fields.
haven't been pounding at home, though, but it's nice to hear Zach Friend say it.
yep. That was it.
Okay, well, thank you.
And the thing I forgot, I left it at home, so I can't wait until next.
Okay. All right, so next is item 5.1, which is an oral report from the MGA and GSP committee meetings.
Yeah, that's put on here because a lot's been happening with the MGA, which is the Mid-County Groundwater Agency, or GSA, or Groundwater Sustainability Agency, and we've been developing the plan that's required to be finished by end of January coming up, so about 6 months, the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, since we're designated as a critically overdrafted basin. And mainly, I put this on here for an opportunity for the board members. We have 2 board members that are on the MGA board, and Dr. Jaffe's on the Groundwater Sustainability Advisory Committee, because to be able to discuss it. And I think one of the main items was of discussion was one of the main sustainability indicator. There's 6 or 7, and that's seawater intrusion and groundwater levels to prevent seawater intrusion. So it's really for Dr. Jaffe, and I can to be able to talk about it and share and get input to take back to our next committee meeting, and for the board members also. When you're sitting there, you have the benefit of all the discussions and his perspective, and maybe mine too, about this 5-year average. And I can describe that, or you can take it, Dr. Jaffe.
Well, it's not just me.
Yeah,
No,
not
it's,
just you.
I mean, it's a question of,
It's a couple people and myself.
is that a safe
Ru-
thing to have a 5-year average?
Director Daniels has brought this up numerous times as well. So, first of all, the last meeting of the Groundwater Sustainability Advisory Committee is the 19th. So we're talking 2 weeks plus a day or so. And so at that point, we're going to be asked to approve a plan. And it has measurable objectives and minimum thresholds, and are the two real key things. And the measurable objectives are the goals that we'd like to get to, but the minimum thresholds are what we avoid. And they have some you know, if you actually are below a minimum threshold, then you have to take action. And so the one that's of greatest concern to me is how for seawater intrusion, how the groundwater level is being defined over what time period. And it started off at 10-year average, and now it's at a 5-year average. And the problem with that is that you can, if your minimum threshold average over 5 years, let's say the minimum threshold is 10 feet for the coastal monitoring well, that's deemed to be the protective level. So if you have a average of 10.1 over 5 years, you're not below your minimum threshold. But if during that 5-year period you have some 8 feet, some 12 feet, during the periods when it's 8 feet, you have seawater intrusion if that protective level is correct, and it leaves the salt there, and then goes back, and the next time that you go below, it goes even further. So it's so I don't know how to deal with it. I do acknowledge that the protective levels, they're based on a 70th percentile of all the possible characteristics of the aquifer. So it's not an exact number, but in concept, I don't like the idea of averaging over a long period of time. I just wanted to see how others feel about this.
I mean, from what I understand, there's incentive on the part of probably people who want to extract water in those times of drought, that they would want the 5-year average.
Yes.
And so I can see where there's, I mean, I would want what's most protective of the aquifer myself.
Right.
So that's the whole idea. Which I'm not sure what other metric we go with.
So is it instantaneous? Is it a year?
Well,
is it a quarter?
That's what I don't know, what the option
Yeah.
is.
Another feature I wanted to bring up is that I believe by average they mean mean. And mean has the problem that it's the average of all the values. And if one of the values is really out there, it can distort that so that it looks, for example, if Bill Gates were to move onto your block, the average income on your block would suddenly rise up to, several millions of dollars, even though clearly he's the only one that has a huge income and everyone else is down in the dirt, perhaps. And for that reason, a lot of folks, in fact, there's a USGS paper on, using statistics and water stuff, and they recommend using the mean, not the mean, but the median, because that is more representative. So you can have one outlier. In fact, you could have an outlier up and an outlier down, and the median doesn't get affected by that. And so,
Well, that also resolves the problem of when you start measuring your 5 years anyway, too, because if you measure it at a drought, in the middle of a drought, and I think that's part of the problem with the Sustainable Water Act in California, is you're only having to go back to 2013 levels, and that's a drought. That was a drought year throughout the state, and so there is already some kind of a regulatory wise, there's still that a really minimum threshold. I mean, minimum threshold for that. It's already pretty low what you have with this MGA has to be protective of. So I am in agreement with Bruce on that also, because I just feel like it's not going to achieve what most people think that the MGA or the Sustainable Water Protection Act would be intending or was intended to do.
So I mean, as you go back to for the meeting on the 19th, you kind of wanted us to bring our feedback on it, right?
Well, yeah, so that's one opportunity to voice a different opinion. And then in July, when the
Right.
Mid-County Groundwater Agency meets, I think it's the 18th, if I remember the date. Thursday, the 18th is what
Yes.
I remember.
It is.
Then that's another opportunity, but it's better
Be nice to have it figured out ahead of time.
before time. Yeah, before that time. So, Bruce, you're thinking the median, but that has a length of time associated with it as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's, but it's separate from this question of how long is the averaging period, so I would do a median and I'd do it shorter.
Yeah,
In
there,
fact-
a lot of the things are quarterly.
Mm-hmm.
That's another way to go.
Yep.
But go ahead. You were gonna say what
Well,
period?
the other thing is that, I mean, we're supposed to do a status report every 5 years.
Yeah,
So is that one every 5-year chunk? Or does that mean every year you look at that value in the previous 4 years and check that, and then the next year you do it again, one value in the previous 4 years? Because that would be more stringent than just once.
Right.
sure.
Running average.
Running
The
average.
running average, exactly, yeah. So,
Yeah, that would be, you see, that would address some of those concerns too.
That would.
Well, I'll add some additional information for your discussion. In addition to the water levels, there's also, the 5-year average protective elevation proposal. There's also a kind of a backup, so I want to put that out there, that at those monitoring wells, the goal is not to exceed 100 milligrams per liter chloride. And then the minimum threshold is you can't exceed 250. So there is this, I'll call it a backstop, if you will, against that. The other thing that will be coming out at the GSP meeting, and I reviewed it today, and I requested it of the hydrologist, is an analysis of how seawater intrusion, whether it can be pushed out or whether it's permanent, or if it can be pushed out, how that happens. And so they've done a reasonable job of about 5 or 6 test cases, or not test cases, but cases, mainly down in LA, of data and that. And I'll let that unfold at the meeting, what that is. But that may provide additional information to help you make some more reasonable.
Yeah. I personally don't buy the backstop argument. And the reason why is because once you've got it there,
Yeah.
it's gonna keep going. And so it's
It's too late.
It's too late, yeah.
I think the protected water level is the most important, for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether do you 3-year or do you running average with, I mean, it'd be nice to, I don't know what the other alternatives are.
I think they are looking at a running average.
Running median.
I think it is a running average, but I think my impression is that the reports, the updates would be over a 5-year period. So,
But could you have more frequent evaluation and decision-making somehow? That's not necessarily a formal report?
well,
There's
my
certain-
understanding, if you go below that minimum threshold, then that kicks it off.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly going to be watching. That was my whole thing is, we don't want to just call each other up when it reaches 100 or 250. If we're seeing that incline, there should be a game in place, measures, a mitigation measure to change our plan.
But sometimes can't you have like a standard, like, say the running average can't be below blah, blah, or a single year can't be below blah?
Sure.
Yeah.
Like you could have 2 different criteria, like we
Good.
do for our urban water management plan.
And I think the double blah,
Yeah.
the double blah strategy might work.
Right.
So
Don't quote me on
So,
it.
so basically, say, okay, we'll say it's okay to use the running average, but if, let's say it's 10 feet, if it goes below 9 feet or 8 feet or whatever Cameron says indicates it's coming on fast,
Right.
that's an additional trigger
Yeah.
for 1 year.
So the
Yeah.
slope, I guess.
Oh, but yeah, but then you kind of don't ignore those, like you said, we have a 4-year drought or something, you know, then
Right.
you're on top of it.
So how does the water district currently, what do they do? Our water district?
Well, we try to maintain the protective elevations that are set at the 70th percentile. So we still got a 30% risk even at those levels theoretically. And we saw that one of those levels in the last report out, with it at the level it's supposed to be at, I believe it was, we got a little more increase in chlorides. So that's a trigger to say that we're not quite right on our
Right.
protective water levels.
Interesting.
So then it would be more of the people related to our agency that would be constrained, because we are already fairly constrained in self-monitoring. So it would be what would trigger private well users and the public water users, or what? Like,
I think another way to
how would
think,
these people, how would everybody be bound together on this action item?
Oh, good question.
I think another way to think about this issue from a different way is to think about, okay, if something were to happen, whatever, how long would it take us to respond? How long would it take us to fix the problem? Because that's the key thing to my mind, is not just, some level of, but, we need to have enough early warning that we could then do something to make that, if we go over the
Minimum threshold.
yeah, before you get to the minimum threshold, at the top level. So, where,
Your goal.
yeah, the goal. So make the goal strict enough that then that gives you enough time to keep it from going over the minimum threshold. And
Right. So if you have a quicker reaction time, you don't have to be as strict.
exactly. But
And if you have a slow reaction time,
which I think is our case.
Nothing quick.
yeah, certainly in the next,
Because there's no penalty for, going over the objective.
right.
It's going over the minimum threshold that
Right.
really puts you in the slammer. So I'd say make the goal to be as strict as we can, because that would tell us early. And
Oh, I think the
good.
competing interest, so to speak, is Santa Cruz, our partners, when they do want to pull out, it'd be good to give them the most latitude as possible, but at the end of the day, not violate the groundwater basin. And I think that's the sweet spot, but I think,
that's the minimum threshold, though.
okay. Yeah.
That's,
But I think they could have what they want, which is, a fairly relaxed minimum threshold, but then a very stringent goal.
Okay, that's one way to look at it.
So, say that again, a relaxed minimum threshold,
Yes,
or relaxed measurable objectives.
the threshold, the
Let's say
Requirement.
10 feet is your protective level.
okay.
So, what do you mean by relaxed?
Well, for that one, you could do 5-year averages.
Okay,
But then the objective, the goal, could be every year or every quarter even.
okay,
Because when that happens, then that would encourage the MGA then to start doing these things to stop it from going
from
over.
going, yeah.
Oh, that's
things is
interesting.
that? What things is that?
Well, I mean, certainly the
Redistribute
the
pumping if
quicker,
possible.
yeah, redistributing your pumping, or
More recharge.
perhaps getting some more, we're planning to build our plant double size so we could get more RO in there to have more recharge happening, or whatever, but, whatever it is, it's liable to
Stricter
take time.
conservation, I mean.
Yeah, emergency reductions.
Right.
And changing, pumping patterns.
So does
Which wells we're using would be
Yep.
key, I think.
that's probably one of the quickest things to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
But is there, when they're below measurable objectives, does that kick off action?
No, it's just when it's below, let's talk about water levels, because it's the opposite with concentrations. When water levels are below the minimum threshold, that kicks off action. There is no action when you're, regulatory action, mandated regulatory action when you're below the measurable objective. So, but I think that's an interesting concept, and I haven't heard it presented that Dr. Daniels has, that we set the measurable objective more stringent, basically, and so you're aiming for that.
Or higher?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's complicated, you have to think about it, but it's an
For
idea
more
that hasn't
frequent
been presented.
evaluations, that.
I like the blah blah strategy. Where
I need to come up with another name.
Someone
for
would
it.
argue that we already have that.
The
That
gold
all
No,
standards.
okay, we need another term for it, but not just have an average, but also have, two different criteria.
it's like,
A longer-term criteria and a short-term criteria.
So there will be an
Yeah.
opportunity at the advisory committee to voice opinions, and then again at the MGA. So, like I said, the hydrologists are bringing back a study on
Okay,
how
yeah.
groundwater.
But the overarching, what I'm hearing here in concept is be strict, and it's not a place to be lenient on the goal, push for,
No. That's the most important thing,
Yeah.
honestly, is maintaining our protected
there-
levels.
there's details on how you do that. And I think it would be more palatable to Santa Cruz if it was a 5-year average with an additional 1 year below a certain level. So that'd be it goes below that level, it's like, oh, not good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Any public comment on this item? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for doing that again. I know it's been a ton of work. Let's see. The next item is just our annual water production report.
Yes, good evening. So this report describes our sources and our well and water treatment plant quality and maintenance history, as well as water levels, yield, and production capacities. Each well also has a specific capacity graph in its particular section. Specific capacity is a way to judge the overall health of a well. It's the drawdown divided by the well yield. So especially with the purissima wells, as the wells age, they lose specific capacity. I did want to point out the specific capacity graph of Estates well that is going to be a very important well to be paired with the Pure Water Soquel
What
project.
page is that on?
That is on
Oh, I got
108.
it right here, yeah. I just haven't-
So that has lost like 75% of its specific capacity since the well was installed. So we're gonna need to replace that well sometime in the future to have it be paired with the Pure Water Soquel project. On page.
By paired, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, so we're gonna be increasing our pumping at certain wells while we're recharging with the Pure Water
Okay,
Soquel.
all right, got it.
And Estates is one of the
Okay,
major pumpers.
check.
State regulations require that a water system meet the maximum day demand, which is the highest max day demand over the past 10 years, with source capacity alone. So page 118 shows that we do have enough regular, well, actually, we don't have enough regular production capacity to meet that, but we do have short-term production capacity, and the regular production capacity is based on wells operating no more than 12 hours per day, which is recommended by our hydrogeologist. But for short-term periods to meet high demand, we can run them longer. A system is also required to meet 4 hours of system peak hour demand, and that can be met with both sources and storage capacity and also emergency supply. And we have enough capacity to meet that. And table 3 is another way to look at our production capacity, and it did go up at the end of 2018 over 2017. It was our production capacity in 2017 was 4.4. It went up to 5.3 at the end of last year because we did bring Seascape well online, and then Altivo is online, and it's not
Backup?
used. Yes, it's there in an emergency. We just run it once a week on hand for a short period of time, just to
Well, I
keep it
noticed you
ready.
have that in the column for active source, and I wouldn't think of Altivo at this point as active for us.
Well, it's active versus standby. It's a state definition, and standby wells you can only use for 5 days at a time, no more than 15 days a year for emergencies. Altivo is there. We can turn that on and have no restrictions in using it. So, and that's why
At least
it's
until the Chrome 6
correct.
happens.
Any questions?
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. So the next item is actually what the item that Ron brought up at the beginning, which is conditional and unconditional will serve letters. And so these seem to be more urgent than was originally thought.
Right, good evening. So due to other priorities last week, I was unable to really get this memo written in time to get out in the packet. Late Friday, we were informed that one of these was very urgent, and so you are now asked if you can consider taking action on this, and the Government Code Section 54954.2 B2 does allow our board, you, to take action on non-agenda items not appearing on the agenda or in the board packet when 2/3 of the board present, or all members, if less than 2/3 are present, determine that there's a need to take immediate action. So that means tonight 4 of the 5 of you would first decide, yes, we want to take action on this, and then we'll go through the normal routine of making the motions, and it would, in order to pass, we'd need 3 of the 5.
Okay.
So
and
we
what
have
wa- what was-
2.
So there was nothing special. So what is the urgent nature of it that it couldn't wait till June 18th?
It's a medical need to get an ADU constructed as soon as possible.
There were 2 things. We had a slight miscommunication where we promised that would be on this agenda, and we we didn't fully communicate with each other, and we were too busy. We had to prioritize, and we had to make decisions last week. And so Taj and I decided not to put this on the agenda. Subsequent to that, one of the will serve holders informed us of the urgent need related to the development of one of the facilities, and it's medically related to somebody moving into the facility. So we thought, based on those 2 situations, that it met the criteria of urgent, but didn't make the board packet criteria that the statutory requirements are. So, and we've conferred with legal counsel that he's comfortable with that too.
All right, and these look like fairly standard ADU.
They're conversion ADUs, yeah, so it
Okay.
would not be a new structure, it would be part of an existing structure converted into a
Okay.
relatively small unit.
Got it. Okay, any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none.
Well, I'd like, so both of them are medical need, or there's,
Just one, but when we were acting on that, we thought, in all fairness, we should bring the other one along too, because we sent the same signal, I believe, is that correct? To both of them. And we couldn't think of any harm. I mean, I always think that the public have proper notification. Well, legally they do here, so we're fine there, but on a grander scale, is it still the right thing to do? And I couldn't think of any reason that it wouldn't be in any other form. I mean, if people, for example, didn't want the conversion ADU, this is not the venue to do that. That's the county, and they go to that. We're strictly about water, whether it meets our criteria, and shouldn't vary otherwise.
And, I mean, later in the meeting, we're gonna be discussing possible ways to make
Yeah.
the agendas more efficient, which might include administrative approval of some of these. So rather than even coming to the board, just as a perspective thing. Not that we've decided anything, but just we're gonna discuss. So, comments, yes, sir.
Well, I think the one unit that does have a medical need, that one would, for me, qualify for this thing. The other one, just because it happens to be in the hopper, I don't quite see the need to put that one in on a strict basis.
My understanding was that one was also told it was going to be on this agenda.
It was just,
They were told
That's
that,
the reason,
yes.
they were both, to some extent.
it was keeping up with our word on that one.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that, especially since they're both, they are ADUs, they're not major developments or, these aren't,
Huge lot water use.
Yeah, they're existing units, actually, that are just being converted, right? Both these?
That's right.
Yeah, so the
And-
structures exist.
Yeah, and
Within-
the county does have a relatively streamlined process now where they go straight to building. So sometimes, there is a longer wait in planning. I believe they do go to building now? Okay.
And am I correct in that there's a law in the legislature that's gonna take us out of the picture completely on some of
Well,
these?
if
Yeah,
it
so as
passes.
these are conversion units, we can't require them to have a separate meter
Okay,
like we can for a
Yeah.
new
Even-
ADU, but
yeah.
they're still subject to our water demand offset program.
okay,
And that new law might even change our ability to collect those fees.
okay.
So the medical need one, I'm sympathetic to. The other one, not as sympathetic. What's the effect for that one, if it's, besides the fact they were told that it would be on tonight's agenda? Is there an adverse
I didn't have
effect?
further discussions with that one. It was just, we thought from a fairness perspective, we would include it, but I'm
Fairness
sure
because
there's
yeah.
I would imagine there's some repercussions going through the process at the county. It's another 2-week delay, but I can't say the level of urgency.
Okay.
fully.
But presumably it would be on the next agenda, right?
Yes, if you don't approve it tonight, definitely it'll be on the next agenda, correct, y'all? Okay.
I would like to take each one individually.
Well,
I think
before you
that'd
do
be
that,
I think that'd be acceptable. I mean, what we have here is one customer that was caught in a bind, and we try to, and a little bit misled by us, and so we try to correct those situations where we're customer advocates and where there is a legal avenue, and we feel it's the right thing to do. So definitely for that other one, and do y'all have a sense, do you deal with the other applicant at all?
I didn't directly, but I know initially when staff told them that they didn't make the agenda, that they were upset too, but then I guess eventually they were okay with it. So that's what I was told.
Okay. I can see both ways myself. I can see
Yeah.
where we want to honor our word, but I also see a 2-week delay on somebody who's got a long-term project that doesn't have an emergency is probably not a huge deal. So I think Dr. Daniel's idea of considering each one separately is fine. We do need to first vote whether these items can be considered.
Right,
I'll
that's
make the
correct. You
motion.
need a 4/5.
and they'll second it.
To consider them.
Okay, to consider both.
Yeah.
Okay?
Mhm.
All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so now, which one is which?
6.1.1 is the one that has the medical urgency. 6.1.2 is not.
Okay. I'll move that we approve 6.1.1.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I'd be okay with approving the other one too myself,
I will make the motion to do that.
to approve the second one as well.
Yes.
Okay, I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
I'm opposed.
Okay, so that's 3-5, so they're both approved. Okay, there was a
Okay.
dissenting vote on either side here, 3 in favor.
Thank you.
Okay,
I'm sorry, but did Director Daniels vote yes or no on the first one?
He didn't vote.
Vote.
on the first one?
That was the
Medical.
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 Medical,
I voted no on that one, too.
okay. I didn't hear it, that's why I was asking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Shall we go on to the budget?
It's back.
We're back.
So tonight, we're bringing you the 2019-20 budget, still in draft form, but this is the full budget now. And we're letting you know that we did make just some slight changes to it. We added $43,500 more to it for tank inspection at Cornwell and some possible work there, and then some additional computer services and office services. So that was the only change that was made to the budget that was brought to you at the workshop. But now in its full form is the full budget. We have every intention of submitting it to the Government Finance Officers Association again this year for consideration for the Budget Recognition Award. And before we do that, one of the things that they have made a comment on our past submissions is that we don't have performance metrics in there. We do collect performance information in terms of how many acre feet of water are saved by our rebates, or how many main breaks we have in a year, et cetera. So I'd like to go ahead and include some of those metrics before I actually submit it to the GFOA, but I just didn't have time to get them included in the draft. So any changes I made wouldn't change the budget itself, it would just change the presentation slightly.
Okay. Questions? Members of the public?
I'd like to make a motion that we accept it with the additions that are being proposed.
I'll second, but I have a couple little just minor wording questions.
We
if
did
that's
notice,
okay.
yeah, Ron
May not
also
be the
pointed out
same
some
ones.
wording issues that he would like me to correct. I know
Eh.
it's not the Soquel Valley Basin any longer, it's the Santa Cruz Mid-County Basin, so we'll be making that change.
And I just have little tiny things, like when we talk about on page 131 of 342, which has the little letter to the Board of Directors, on the right-hand column, it just says, this $90 million project. I don't know, we might want to say this project with an estimated cost of, you know, because it's not a fixed, I would love it if we had a guaranteed price, but we don't at this point. So that was a minor thing. And then there was one other thing. Where is that? I highlight these things. Oh yeah, so on the next page 132 at the bottom, when we're talking about the MGA, it said work will continue, let's see, in 2019-2020 to support the agency to develop a GSP. I just thought maybe we would, somewhere in there it might say that the plan has to be in by, isn't it January?
January of 20.
Yeah, it's because 1920
2022.
sounds like, you know.
2020 is coming up.
I don't know, it's just, it's not
That's right,
necessarily
that's
important for
right.
the budget, it was
Okay.
just
Yeah,
for
accurate.
accurate information. That's all I had.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, once again, that it was, really represents a lot of work. It was a really great report. So I think it's a good one to submit.
Well, thank you. It's a team effort for sure, and special shout out to Melanie and her team for some really fabulous photos this year. They
Oh
did
yeah, the
a
photos are
I
great.
really enjoyed the photos.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in. Some of those photos, they're from everybody, but definitely Leslie takes a fair amount. I know you go out on your own time and shoot them. And I just got to say, last weekend when we had the holiday, I know Leslie was in there doing the budget Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, all 3 days.
Wow.
So we really appreciate you
Thank you.
doing that. And Ryan was not available, so she had to really toe the line. He did an incredible job, so thank you,
But
Leslie.
it really does show an immense
Yeah,
amount
yeah.
of work and care. I mean, I really personally have a hard time with budgets, and this one's easier for me to read and digest and understand, so.
Agreed. Yeah, thank you.
Anyway, so, let's see. So, and then do we have to include any motion, the fact that you're gonna add these metrics, or is that just fine as is?
It's just cosmetic, really is what it is. It's not really
Okay.
affecting the budget that we're adopting as a board. They're just some cosmetic additions to the budget.
Okay,
We need to vote on it.
we do. I'd like to move that we actually approve the final version, rather than bring it back.
Okay, I'll move that. I thought the changes that I know of are pretty minor.
They're
Do
minor.
you want to just submit them to that? You know, accept the
Finish it on
budget
there.
with
So is
the
that
minor
number two?
proposed
With
changes.
the- With the
that-
minor proposed changes, including the metrics?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we don't have to, there's another public, an opportunity for the public to,
This is the time.
Yeah, we brought it to you last meeting
I
too.
Right.
just want to double check.
We had the option of continuing it to the next one, or
Gotcha.
approving it now.
Gotcha.
So, I don't know if you moved and I second, or I moved and you second, but either way, we'll call it, she'll
Yeah.
make the motion and I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Great. Thank you very much, Leslie, again, and your team. All right, so we're on to triennial 6.3, triennial report on public health goals.
This report was prepared by Carla James. She could not be here tonight. This is a report that the state requires us to prepare every 3 years. It's unique to California. I don't think any other states require that, but it's a report on levels of constituents that are detected above the public health goal, or the maximum contaminant level goals, but below the MCLs, the regulatory standard, the maximum contaminant level. So PHGs and MCLGs are not standards, and they're not enforceable, and many times they're set so low you can't even detect at that concentration. So the purpose of the report is to give water system customers access to information on levels of constituents even below the enforceable mandatory MCLs. So the report also includes the levels detected, the numerical public health risk associated with the MCL and the PHG or MCLG, which is provided by the State Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. The category of health risk and the best treatment technology that could be available, and an estimate of the cost to install that treatment. So this report covers the 2016 through 2018 monitoring years, and we had 4 compounds that were detected. Copper was detected as part of our lead and copper monitoring rule, where we monitor 30 different household taps for lead and copper. And the source of that copper is the plumbing in the homes themselves, which are all these houses that we sample from have copper plumbing with lead solder. The concentration was detected above the PHG, but below the action level. The other 3 compounds were all radionuclides, gross alpha, radium-226, and radium-228, and they are intermittently detected in all our wells during different years. So Carla also included at the end of the main table a history of the detections of those compounds, so you get an idea that we normally don't detect them, but some years we do. I wanted to point out not in the main table, but in the table on page 313, there is a typo. The radium concentration for Madeline Wells should be 1.2. It's correct in the main table, but not here. So we will correct that for the final report. We also need to set a public hearing for this, and after you accept the report, and we are recommending that to be September 17th. So if there are any questions, I can help you out.
Can you clarify that? I wasn't clear on the motions, because one option was to accept it as final, or,
Or direct staff to make changes, which, the typo will be one of the changes, and if anyone has any other changes. And we need to set the public hearing.
okay, got it.
Why isn't something like arsenic on the list? Because I know it's below the MCL, but above the PHG, which is set in the parts per trillion range.
Well, that's a good question, and arsenic has been included in the reports in the past. For this report, we kind of interpreted the guidance document a little differently than we had in prior years, and the guidance document recommends that you determine a detection based on how you would determine compliance, which is a quarterly average, an annual based on an annual average, but with quarterly testing. And so the detections from T. Hopkins well, the average is less than the detection limit. There have been some detections that have been over the detection limit, but usually they're below. So and the average is below, so that's why we didn't include it for this report.
And I assume that's for other sorts of things like trihalomethanes and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, trihalomethanes, they don't have PHGs for each of the compounds.
Okay,
So
just
they-
the combo, yeah.
Yeah, so this is only for compounds that have PHGs.
And ammonium,
Ammonia is not regulated, and it's not really an issue it's not really a health issue, it's more of a treatment issue. It interferes with the disinfection process. So that's not regulated. The unregulated contaminants are reported on in the annual consumer confidence report when we do the unregulated contaminant monitoring every 4 years. So that's the report where we would put those in, even though there's not PHGs or MCLs, those are reported in there.
Other questions? All right, any public comment on this item? Okay, so seeing none, what's your pleasure?
Well, we've made some changes, right? So we have to do item number 2, motion 2. So I'd make motion 2 and motion 3.
Okay,
second.
it's been moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries, thank you very much.
Yeah, and let me just be clear, so the motions are a little confusing, so it's really accepting the report with some of the changes
Right.
suggested, so it's 1, 2, and 3.
Well, it said or. So, well, you want to clarify your motion is to accept the report with the changes?
Yeah, motion 2.
It just
We
says
have to make changes.
But-
to accept the report.
have to be accepting the report and making the
Right.
changes.
I see up there a 1
It's not
or
correct.
2.
It's not correct.
Yeah.
So what it should say is by motion, accept the report without changes or with slight modifications, accept it as final. And then if that's what you're suggesting, and then return the September 17th meeting for a hearing. I just want to be correct for the record.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Okay, so that's clarified.
Okay, and did public comment?
We did.
We did.
Okay.
That's before there was an eggs.
Okay. Community water plan.
Great. Thank you. Oh yeah, you gotta switch the screen. So as we mentioned at the last, maybe about a month ago, the public outreach and education team has been working on developing a progress report. We have periodically done this publication to our customers related to the latest up-to-date information that's been occurring on the multifaceted plan. So as discussed in the staff memo, we did our last progress report in 2017, and there has been some substantial efforts and progress made to date on many of the supplemental water supply activities. At the last meeting where we sought input from the board, you provided some direction related to not having too many words, keeping to some really distilled points that are easy for people to understand and remember, have pictures, and we also have sought some input, and we met with one of our standing committee members from the Public Outreach Committee, who her background was in education and outreach for museums. So what I want to show you tonight is just the concept of the layout we have for our progress report, and then we will be bringing this back at the next meeting due to some of the staffing resources that we had. We've had a couple of outreach meetings, and we had our WaterWise Academy, so we didn't have a chance to actually get this draft ready to be able to be put in the packet. So the spread of information really is distilled, of course, down to really what the problems and challenges are, and also what the solution is. Oh, make it bigger? Yeah, sorry. As you may remember, for the original community water plan and for our last update, we had an intro kind of letter from Ron, and based on his urging, as well as just kind of really maximizing the space, we decided to not have that and just get right to the chase and kind of introduce the topics just with the issues at hand. On this next spread, we talk about the three-prong approach: water conservation, the groundwater management, and developing new water supplies. Really here, what we're trying to show and explain to people is that conservation is, our cornerstone. We've been talking about how we have what we like to call the biggest water rebates program in the county, since we do have over 30 types of rebates that we offer. And we note in the groundwater management that we are working with others, and we are meeting the regulations, and that we are always trying to reduce pumping away from the coast. And then in terms of the supplemental water supply, which takes the remainder of the update, this is a time where we are introducing some of the components that are actually in our Learning Center. So both in the Learning Center and also as we've been working with partner agencies and understanding a little bit more on the potential yields that we can anticipate from these projects. So that's illustrated on the right. This was some feedback we got from Jennifer, who is on our Public Outreach Standing Committee, is to create a pie chart showing what the volumes were or what the volumes are anticipated. So we are showing that the groundwater pumping with conservation, we'd like to hold that at the 2,300 acre foot per year threshold. We are anticipating the pure water Soquel to be somewhere between 1,200 and 1,500 acre feet per year. We are hoping that if the surface water, that option that we are currently piloting with the city of Santa Cruz, provides that there is some additional water that we could get, that could be about 300 acre feet. And then we do know that the stormwater is more limited in terms of the volume, so we are using the value of 10 to 100. What we don't have in here is based upon the direction that we've received from the board previously in terms of deep water desal. It is still a component, but it obviously is a project at this point that is not really moving in development, so that is not, an option on this table. Based on some direction and feedback from the board, it was really put a lot of information on our project, the Pure Water Soquel. So here we give an update and we talk about the project. We have a graph here that shows with the seawater intrusion prevention wells, we're able to push the water. That could be coming in for seawater intrusion out back, so there's some positive outflow of fresh water. We identify and include that the pure water technologies is not new, so we do mention that it is some other places are developing projects just like this. And again, we do have kind of the graphics that are from the Learning Center, as well as the educational trailer related to the treatment process. We also are trying to include faces of people in the community who are in support of issues related to our community water plan. The bottom picture is Mr. Jamie Profit. He is a longtime member of the Surfrider Foundation. And these are people who have over the course of a couple years have given us some really nice quotes, and we've asked if we could include that on our website and in publications. So this is a quote from him that really just talks about the importance of recycling water. This next page again is, less words, and so that's what we try to entertain on this and distill the facts. At one point, this had 8 facts, and then I tried to throw in 2 more, and Becca said no, and she reduced it down to 6. And so these, again, are things that if people are going to flip through, this maybe hopefully will catch their eye. And again, we want to get out there the effort from Dr. Brent Haddad and the economic impact study that he did for us. And then this spread here talks about the other water supply options. Again, we feel that the board has always been to diversify our water portfolio, don't put everything in one basket. So we do have on these 2 pages an update related to the water transfer purchase and the stormwater capture. Again, on the top, the information on the left, this is, again, why we're not ready yet for this to be in print. We do want to work with the city to make sure that we're capturing the information on our project together and the information on the right. We do want to be working with the County of Santa Cruz, who was our partner for the stormwater capture. We do still note deep water diesel, and as you can see, because the board did not take that off, it is still part of the community water plan, and we just note that kind of what I had summarized earlier related to its status. The picture on the bottom is another community member, Mr. Craig Wilson, and he gave a quote that he would like us to share with the community in terms of the crisis that he feels is happening with the district in terms of not having a fresh and sustainable water supply. And then that's the community water plan, and on the back we just have some information related to who we are and our mission. And we will be working still with the outreach team, and we hope to provide this to any board members for comments that you have either tonight or if you want to share with us so that we can bring it back. One of the comments that we wanted to bring tonight was both from a couple people in our community in terms of the mailing of hard copy materials, as well as some feedback we got from our WaterWise Academy is, how information is distributed. We know that we have to use multiple avenues. We also know that using multiple channels does have a cost to it. And mailing something like this to every customer is very expensive when it comes to postage. And a lot of times people say, I didn't receive it. It gets lost in the mail. We use it a lot for handouts when we meet with people one-on-one, when we're meeting at events. We're always passing these out. So we do feel that there is a purpose to still be printing these out and having it as hard copy. But we wanted to get some input from the board in terms of the usefulness, the cost involved in mailing this to our customers as a hard copy to be received in their mailbox, or as an alternative to send a postcard. That's more of a more cost-effective and affordable route. And then of course we will always be, like in the past, broadcasting it through email and social media.
Yeah, can I add?
Yeah.
So, one of the discussions we have amongst the whole management team and all these other people helping us with the outreach is, we know we need several layers. We have this, and this is kind of the backdrop, so to speak, maybe a one-pager, but the question, we keep wrestling with, what should we send to the customers that will get the most bang for the buck, the most readership, most eye time, and maybe relative to cost to some degree. So is it a postcard? What do people have time for, and where do we get it? I think on the mail out, right? In particular, we're looking for some input on that one.
We've done it also like as a bill insert, but more and more people are going with bill pay.
I wanted just before you mentioned the Waterwise Academy a couple times, and I wanted to thank all the people that came in and worked on that. I met with them as well, and it was a good group of people
Yeah,
that
great
were there to just learn, and definitely as far as outreach, they're like, I feel like they're exactly what we want, is people to then be able to go out there and give like accurate information and dispel misinformation, and they were just, it was great. And so I know, a lot of staff members came in to put that together.
Yeah,
So
thanks for your Saturday effort. I believe it was
That was-
Saturday, right?
good move. All right, thoughts on the plan?
Well, I was, I was looking at it, of course, this is all interesting to me, but I was wondering, but it's still too many pages to be mailed out. And maybe this is something to take up with the outreach committee, just ways that, to make it more compact and, if it's just even one sheet, but, one sheet folded or something like that. A snapshot and then
We,
and then having a full thing to pass out to people, I think is pretty desirable.
Kind of an abridged version?
Yeah, because people, I know, I look at inserts now that I've been I'm on, seeing how important they are. So I am much more conscientious about that, but it is a lot easier if it's just one, a smaller thing, and it's not like reading a book or doesn't involve that much effort.
Right, where we get, half the people looking at a postcard versus a couple of percent looking at this. I mean, that's the way I'm trying to think
exactly.
about it. Where is that?
Like, I like the bullets on the pure water. I don't know the value of talking about stormwater at this time, except in a general way, and a postcard or an insert, because it's much more tentative, and so is the desal. They deserve a sentence, but not too much of a description until we have something more concrete to discuss.
I mean,
That would be just off the top of my head on ways to reduce it to a smaller packet to
Are-
send to people.
are you
other
guys?
thoughts?
Certainly one thing is that you could certainly make a big PDF out of this. So people, for example, you could even put on the bill that we send to people, a checkbox that they could check and say, I would like to get a copy of this, and then we could, send them back one way or the other. I mean, if someone has an interest enough to say, I would like it,
Yeah.
there's a good chance they're actually going to study it. And so we should try to get positive responses back from our customers, not just blast it out everywhere. So, in our bill inserts, in our, I think we have a quarterly thing we send out to folks on email, again, trying to solicit interest in things like that. And as to stormwater, I had an issue about that too. I know the last time we had a presentation about stormwater, and there was some mention about all the various things we're going to need to do to make that actually work. Like it needs to have an EIR, we need to get a permit from the regional board, we need to, actually put the dry wells in, and even sometimes, there's stuff in the water we'd have to filter out before it even gets to the, anyway, there was some long list that was mentioned. And I'd like to see, first of all, the list put together, and then some rough estimate of what this whole thing would cost. Because even if we get 100 acre feet, it may be more expensive than we'd be willing to go with. So it doesn't need to be an exhaustive study, but just a rough envelope guess of it. Because if we can eliminate from consideration like we've done deep water, we should go ahead and do that.
If you're gonna do that, you should also indicate what the cost share would be.
Yeah, I think probably the next step is to bring back the results from the investigation that was just completed out at Seascape Golf Course, and, determine if it's even feasible to do anything first before we
Right.
put any more time into figuring out how to do it, and what the cost might be. So, part of the study too is to help inform, if it does look feasible, what a design might look like at each of those different sites, because it's different depth to groundwater and different soils and different dry well design, or a swale, or that sort of thing, different pretreatment possibly. So without kind of having the results of that investigation, it's hard to say what it would look like.
So, but that's easy to say, we're actively investigating, or we're seriously interested in it, but we don't have
Enough information, and that's
enough
kind of the,
information, instead of just a whole half page.
sure, we can reduce that.
I would tend to put it in the same category as Deepwater, because if Deepwater came back up, we would start to think about it.
Any public comment on this?
Wait, we got another comment here. I butted in on
Yeah.
Dr. Jeff.
Sorry.
But then there'll be public comment. So just two kind of 30,000-foot comments. The first one is, and this could just be me, and maybe it's been vetted through the outreach committee, why are we working with acre feet? Why don't we use gallons to let people know in all those figures, millions of gallons? I think they'll relate to that, whereas I don't think they'll relate to acre feet.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
So that's something to consider. And then the other is, I'm very, very much think this is a great effort, and the staff has done tremendous work on it. And I'm always leery of advocacy versus objectivity. So just when whatever the final version is, put on that objective filter on pointing out, the problems as well as the good qualities of each of these. So.
I agree. Any public comment on this item?
Thank you, Becky Steinbrenner. Thank you for the report, and I agree with Director Jaffe. This is a lot of work, and it's very nicely presented. I think I really want to thank you, Director Jaffe, for pointing out that it would be more consistent actually with information that the public gets from the city of Santa Cruz, that the amounts be changed to gallons, millions of gallons or billions of gallons instead of acre feet. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your comment about objectivity. So to that end, I would like to see some discussion in the Pure Water Soquel project portion about contaminants, and address that, because we all know that is a concern that a lot of people have about this project. So to address it openly and with objectivity, I think really lends a sense of transparency and accountability. And I think that would be something that you'd want to consider adding in. I also have a question. I also think it would be good to put the projected cost of this project in, and perhaps a construction timeline if it does go forward. People want to know when things are going to happen, and they've just had a big rate increase to support this project. So I think your customers would be very interested in seeing where their money might be going. I have a question about the bullet point that grants are 50%. Do we know that for sure? And also a mention of Mr. Haddad's full-page cost-benefit assessment. His whole premise was that there are no other alternatives, and that's really not true. I noticed that on the page discussing the water transfers, there was a lot of blank space, and it's a very expensive mailer, a very expensive thing, so it would be good to have some good information about that, about water transfers, how much that could be, and that it is a pilot project at this time, but could be expanded in the future. And what you've learned from this past year's pilot project working with the city of Santa Cruz on this. I'm a little concerned that Craig Wilson's photograph would be in there. He's a great guy. I know him. He's a sheriff. So I feel like he's not a water expert. The surf rider person, I understand the connection, but the sheriff, who really is not a water expert, is a great guy. But I think that it's sort of selling, using his persona and his place in the community to sell the project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will mention just one thing related to the page on, see if I understood you correctly, Melanie, the one on the water transfer, you were waiting for some information from Santa Cruz to complete that page.
We're working with our project partners
To
on
work together
the
on that.
projects that we have with them. So the city and the county for water transfers and stormwater.
So I was gonna say, if we decide to do some of the things that were suggested with pure water, then we should do the same things with river water transfer. So for example, mentioning that pure water has no constituents that are above the mark, and then for example, the report that we just got from the city about all the things that they have in their system, you know, the dozens of constituents. So you'd have to, if you're gonna be that way, and you know, maybe 1 to 200 million that the city's planning to get their river water transfer stuff working and decrease the constituents in the water and all kinds of stuff. So you want to do that, and then the time, you know, they haven't even picked it yet, and it won't even be selected until probably late next year. And then, so if you're going to do timing and constituents and cost for that, then you need to do the same thing for the river transfer stuff.
Yeah.
Right, that's kind of why there are some blanks, because we are trying to include cost, the volume, the reliability, scalability, and timeliness, and we need to fill out the timeliness, because some of these are unknown for us because we're not the lead agency.
And I would also put in drought reliability for pure water is 100%, and the other is much less.
Right.
I agree with
At
that.
one point, I think in one of the renditions, I think it gets to your request and Dr. Jaffe's, we kind of had a chart that, you know, 5-star, 3-star, so water quality, you know, might be 5-star for pure water, 3-star for the river, whatever. So we'll look back at that. It's, you know, again,
I think for what Ron was saying, we had water quality as a criteria. We wanted to standardize the information. So if we were going to do something on pure water, there was going to be the same information on each of the other two, stormwater and surface water. And so for water quality, the water that is provided to customers of the district by groundwater, surface water from the city of Santa Cruz, it meets all state and federal regulations. Now, there are these issues related to when you get to contaminants of emerging concern and what treatment technologies can take it out and what cannot. It can open up a can of worms. When we show what our groundwater has or what the city's surface water has, that, as Dr. Daniel says, is not taken out through those treatment processes like the purified water, we don't want to be alarming that the water isn't safe to drink. That water by the city and by the district is still safe to drink. So we decided to not put that in here for that reason.
Well, you could, if you wanted to put that, the fact of meeting requirements, then you could put 000, because all three sources.
right, and that was the thing, that it didn't add any value. That was I think, the point there. So do we dive into, you know, again, it goes back to eyes, seconds, that we can grab our customers, and where, you know, it may not be a critical, it's not a critical issue.
Getting back to the balanced approach, though, we do, you know, it always seems like we should present the whole picture, you know, and the downside of any project, I mean, is it's costs money and the energy use, you know, but if we bring, and I think it's good to have that, but I think if we need to mention the alternative is losing the whole aquifer. So, you know, but it is true. I mean, we're going to try and use 100% renewable energy, but it does use energy and it does cost money. But the alternative just is not acceptable. You know.
So my last comment is,
keep it as simple as possible. I mean, there's all this that we could add into
Right,
it.
no, it's,
Because,
That's what Becca says every day when I provide a couple comments. She's like, Mel, less, not more.
Well, I have to
But-
say, we've come a long way since the IRP.
Yes.
Like this
Yeah,
thing,
yeah,
right?
no,
Yes,
you're
no,
doing
it's
a
great.
great job. You're
no,
doing
it
a great
really
job.
is, overall, it's good. But you wanted comment and you got it. All right, so,
Second prize is 2 comments.
yes. The next ones are just related to resolutions relating to funding opportunities.
Mhm. Oh, do you want to do it? I really don't have any comments unless you have questions. These are just 2 resolutions that we'd like to ask the board to approve.
Okay, seems straightforward to me. Any comments, questions from the board?
Thanks for doing this.
Any public comment on this item? Okay, I'll move approval of,
Wait,
You're getting
there's
some.
a public comment.
oh, sorry, didn't see you getting up.
I have a bad hip, and it
Yep,
takes me a
you
while.
got time.
Thank you. Can you please explain, Becky Steinbrenner, can you please explain what the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act program is? Thank you.
Thank you.
I have noted, I've been going through the records, and I see that in the past, the district and the county jointly applied for this, so I'd just like a little bit of more information, please.
And I'll just say, I can tell my brief understanding is it's just a loan program through the federal government, through E EPA.
Well, actually, WIN is also a grant program. It's not just a
Right, but-
loan program.
Right, but I think she's asking about WIFIA,
Oh, I thought you was asking about WIN. Okay.
whichever, okay. So one's a grant program, one's a
Loan
loan
program.
program through the federal government.
Yep.
Yeah, and I just, we appreciate the board considering and approving this. I want to let them know why we're aspiring to go after all this. We're going to be very strategic in how we use our staff resources, so we may go after one item or both, like the Title 16 and maybe not the other, but we wanted to have that option until we can fully assess. Sometimes saying no is the best option we can choose to make sure we don't spread ourselves out. So I don't
Right.
want to
Although
falsely.
if there's a chance at getting money to save us money, we can use our consultant as well.
Right. We'll weigh all that. I just
Yeah.
want to let the board know.
So back to my motion, I'll move approval of both resolutions.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Director Lather,
Yes.
Vice President Daniels.
Yes.
Director Jaffe,
Yes.
Director Christensen,
Yes.
and President LaHue.
Yes. Next is the Aqua Region 5 item.
Yeah, so this was just put on here to give any board member the opportunity, if they desire, to ask their colleagues to nominate them. Wasn't sure, nobody indicated any desire to me, but we like to give everybody the fair and equal opportunity.
Looking left,
Enough.
looking right, looking internally. I think we can take no action.
Okay, fantastic.
Public comment on this one or not?
Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we will go to the 6.7. Board
Yeah.
efficiency.
Yeah, so kind of excited to present this item. This one's been in the background since October, I believe, when Director Christensen said, recognized, and we appreciatively say it, that staff has a pretty full plate, and the board too, for that matter, the way they're helping us. And so are there any ways, ideas, things we can do to make our meetings more efficient? Initially, I think Director Christensen proposed maybe we could go every other, meet once a month versus 2. She did say something the other day, and I may share it, and I thought it really struck home with me. It's that it's kind of changed my reflection on this memo or the concept, that if we did go to one meeting a month, would you feel disconnected as board members because there's so much going on in the routine? And that's the last thing we want to achieve. Everything we've done with the standing committees and the way we've woven ourselves is to make everybody as aware and vibrant as possible. So I wouldn't want to lose that. But really, the purpose of this memo is to generate some ideas, not necessarily say do this or that now. Generate them. We can bring back more. Maybe we could implement one or two over the next month or so, because we only meet once in July and once in August, and see how that feels, and then reflect back and continue to build on that. And you can see there's some specific ideas in here. Right here, here's a table showing how what various agencies, how they meet. So, I would say.
Nice slip, though, right?
Yeah, it's a slip. Really one of the more progressive ones I thought was what they're trying to do. The general manager up there with San Lorenzo Valley, they're reconfiguring their whole thing. I think they went from 1 to 2, and now they're looking at 1 with a couple special meetings in between. We were thinking maybe we take the opposite approach in that we say we're going to do 2 meetings a month, but if we see there's not a lot coming up, or we could take a break, maybe we cancel a meeting. So that's the reflective side of that. Certainly, they're all over the place the way different agencies handle it. I think the average is probably like 1.5 a month or something like that. But if we scroll down here, here were some ideas just to really, more than anything, to generate discussion around. That's what we're asking tonight. Feedback, and not for it to end just here, but to create dialogue ongoing. And we've generated some ideas since this time. I know Emma's done some research and has come up with some ideas to actually further, like number 7 on there. I won't go into all those details unless you ask. But if we do stick with 2 meetings a month, then it really comes down to how can we efficientize those meetings, not lose the decision-making level that we attain, the high level of decision-making, the community input, but still get to where we need to go, and all that combined. So I'll leave it with that, and the motions are if you want to direct us to try some of these ideas out, we can do that, and then return in August and see how they worked, or just continue to bring ideas to you and see how they shake out. We can always change back.
So, go ahead.
Couple things. One thing that has always kind of annoyed me and about our meetings is, we're getting this packet that's, 200-300 pages, and spend hours of doing it. And then sometimes it's good for the public to go through that again. But, since we've all spent the time reading it, having a half an hour presentation, kind of repeating that again, often isn't worthwhile, I think.
Okay.
Sometimes it is for the audience, but often it isn't, I think. So be cautious about that, because that would save a lot of meeting time to, repeat that again.
To do more on consent?
So,
well, I mean, just a list. For several of the things we've had tonight, I don't have anything to say. Do you have any questions?
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of things, that's great, because it's complex, and we've already spent the time thinking about it, reading about it, and we already have some notion of what it is. So repeating it again, spending another however long going through what it was, is not helpful. It's not effective.
Cut to the chase.
Cut to the chase, right.
In some instances.
So be strategic about when you want to take 15 minutes or half an hour to repeat.
I think you can assume with this board that we've read the packet.
Yes.
Well, we always assume that. It's more for the 3 or 4 people watching.
Not a
it in
normal
the audience.
board.
Yeah, we understand that.
Another thing I was thinking about, just thinking about to the way we did the finance thing this time, as we've done it several times. There was a workshop where we sat there and talked about it, and it's much more informal, and you can really get much more feedback, I think, from the board and that kind of thing. And certain things we looked at, like in tonight's agenda, it's the first time we've ever seen it and the last time we'll ever see it. I mean, it comes up once, and it's fairly straightforward, and we adopt it, and it's done. But other things, like our new infrastructure for metering, we had several meetings about that, and I think rather than having the staff spend a lot of time putting together a formal proposal and then having the board destroy it, because they've got all kinds of ideas of what should be done, having a workshop first on some of these things would save staff time, certainly.
So maybe even some board meetings be half workshop or totally dedicated.
Or just have a separate, I mean,
Yeah.
if we're only doing one a month, having the alternate time spot be a workshop on some of these things that we're
That's the
thinking
San
about doing.
Lorenzo model to
Yes,
some degree.
yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, Cruz?
Now,
Or no?
I had
Rochelle, you were
something.
next.
I have heard that there's a way, like if something is on the CIP list up to a certain amount, it could be, and the CIP list was approved by the board in the budget, and the bids come in at or below that number, that it can actually be approved by the general manager rather than come to the board for everything. You know, I don't know if there's a legal limit.
No, some districts have different numbers.
I mean, I think certain things, we wouldn't want to do that, but there's a lot of projects that come in here that are like $50,000, I don't know, painting the tank projects that really, we don't have to listen to the whole presentation, and I'm not sure if we have to approve it if it's already approved in the budget.
Okay,
You don't. Scotts Valley does 100K
okay.
is the general manager's limit
Yeah.
on a project,
Yeah.
on a project that's already been approved
And certainly telling the
in the
board
budget.
about what's been done. There's a lot less overhead than actually having us go through it and formally approve and having public comment on it and et cetera. So I agree with you.
Right. And you know, that, I just want to point out, it's not just the board meetings. You know, for every minute we spend here, this is 10 minutes, this is a couple
of
other
course.
minutes of
Yeah.
our public's time. And then there's the prep of it, right? Which is, you know, it goes
Halftime.
through multiple levels of review. Okay.
What's the current limit for general manager approval? Is it 25,000?
45?
45,
Okay.
44, 5, something like that.
Yeah, it's
We
like
should do something.
45K.
So on this one meeting a month, we do have one meeting a month during the summer.
We do.
And
We-
January usually,
In January.
So
and sometimes December.
Yeah.
It seems
that
like our
create
meetings are
problems?
always full.
Well, I think what I was suggesting in the memo is we talk more about that in August, see if you know, I don't think it's created any insurmountable problems over the years. I'm looking at nodding heads or not from staff.
They're ignoring you.
And, yeah, I know, yeah. And, you know, it's the same at work.
But sometimes we've had to even schedule extra meetings,
Yeah, and we have had to do that.
depending on what's
Sure.
going on.
Sure.
So I
So
kind of like the
Certainly
idea of,
raising the limits and using things that are already approved in the budget, that could reduce the number of things that could even be possible to be a problem.
Okay.
So I'm a bit concerned about outreach.
Mm-hmm.
We get people coming here, Capitola, but it's people who live near Capitola
Mm-hmm.
who tend to come here. And we have had meetings at the, Community Water Foundation.
Right.
But this is just, I don't have a well-formulated idea, but I like the idea of moving the meeting around. And perhaps the meetings that we move around could, be more juicy, something that gets, is not the mundane stuff, but is something that, people would benefit from who don't normally go to meetings. Is that?
Right. And you made that suggestion. I apologize for not putting it in
That's
here.
okay.
I wrote it down and I was telling the staff tonight, I can't believe I forgot your suggestion in this thing. But anyway, so go ahead.
Yeah, the only downside of that, unless it's a regular thing, 1 month you meet here and the other month you meet there, you're gonna have people showing up here when you're meeting somewhere else.
Right,
I mean,
right. So,
we've done that for workshops though,
Well,
so,
that might be the happy place with this,
Right.
is at certain workshops. And I think your intent is to draw out people who may not normally live close
Yeah.
to here. They would,
yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe it's more of one of these workshop meetings.
that'd be,
And the workshop meetings could have a normal meeting associated with them if there's, time-sensitive, decisions that have to be made.
I currently like the idea of like having the meetings, but canceling as needed, that was the experience I had on LAFCO. Is Pat would look at the workload.
Yeah.
And so there's always a placeholder, so that you're ready to have the meeting, but if there's just not enough stuff, they just cancel it in time,
Like that too.
you know?
If they cancel it, you go, all right.
You just go to the next meeting. No, but I mean, it's, because sometimes,
Senior night
Yeah.
at the movies.
rather than having to schedule an extra one, it seems easier to cancel if you're like, hey, we could put that off till,
Okay.
you know, the first meeting in March instead of having the second meeting in February or whatever, you know?
I think we have to start by getting the agendas to be smaller. And then we can do that, you know, because
think
they're
that-
usually pretty
That's true,
packed.
but if we do this,
I have to say that, judging from when I first started on the board,
Yeah.
it's
So
Better.
considerably streamlined already. I mean,
Yeah.
regularly we would meet, 10:30, and that's when I started thinking about this, about what we could do, but I think it's actually, I've turned around to wanting, meeting twice a month is a good idea, shorter meetings, and then I think, I like the idea of a workshop and a meeting, and then canceling meetings as needed, but I think it's easier to have it scheduled and, just,
Agree.
Okay.
I know there's a flow chart, everybody in the district is planning already, a couple months
Right,
ahead
right.
already, so it's easy to visualize what,
Yeah.
but if you need a meeting for something, then there is, even if it ends up being an hour meeting or something.
Well, and as you're planning, instead of planning something for every meeting, you could plan, like as you guys are saying, well, what's, like, looking at the calendar, what's gonna be on that next agenda?
We
You-
do that.
You
we do
could
it.
skip a meeting and
Yeah.
then just see if you need it.
Yeah.
I just don't want meetings that go to 11 o'clock because we're only having one meeting a month.
Yeah,
Right.
see, I'd hate to go back to
Well,
that,
Yeah.
those
you-
times.
You
After a
lose
few hours,
You lose your efficiency.
Yeah.
it's tough to think.
But if,
I mean, you're already having trouble getting my attention at 2 hours.
yeah, and that's true for everybody, That's why we went to the 6th, because at 9, it started like,
One possibility, which is number one up there, is we have these committees. Now, they don't meet very often. It's 1 hour every 2 or 3 months, but
Right.
we could have them start to do some things.
right.
Uh,
And that could be a time where maybe a meeting's canceled too. Like, we have 2 meetings next week, right? 2 standing committee meetings. So, I mean, could figure in that way too, especially if they were empowered a little more.
Do you wanna look
It
at,
isn't very long for that, though,
Yeah.
and the frequency is pretty, it's not a very frequent meeting, so I'm not sure you can keep people,
You'd have to probably have them more frequently or have them longer if you're gonna actually give them
then you would
power to
winnow
make
it down.
decisions.
Yeah, then you'd be down to
Yeah,
smaller, I don't know, it's something to worth thinking about.
yeah. I mean,
So-
there's value to every board member getting the same information at the same time. I mean, that's important. So if I may direct us.
do you wanna go through each one?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if we could just get exactly what I was gonna ask.
Okay, good thought.
Yeah.
All right, so on number 1, relying on standing committees, I think that right now is, each committee has different meeting times and frequencies, I think.
Mm-hmm, they do.
So I suppose that we'd have to see what issues could effectively be dealt with by them. Or
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure it's a good idea. It's just one that's up there, I'm being honest. here.
anybody have any?
For example, we were talking about physical limits for approval, and certainly you could say that standing committees could approve projects or things that need to be expended that are below $50,000, or I don't know what, but something like that,
No, it's a volunteer, these guys are volunteers, and sometimes they feel much freer to not show up if they have a conflict than board members do. It
It's
has
true.
less, unless we want to change the whole structure and nature of those committee meetings, there's always the stalwarts, but there's, in terms of finding a quorum, I don't think it's a reliable way to actually make decisions on action
I don't think it's a
items.
decision-making body. I think
Yeah,
it's an
I agree.
advisory body.
It's advisory, and I actually, that's part of the value of it, so.
Yeah.
A value of them, I get a lot of really good ideas, from that,
So
Okay, so we won't tackle that one, number 1, right now.
number 2,
Yeah, and this was just a thought that, you know, if decisions had to be made, and we do this to some degree, like there was a letter for San Lorenzo that was asked by a board member, and then I contacted the president, and the president has that authority. So I think we did that somewhere else recently too. But so we are starting to branch that, but it's an easy one. As a general manager, it makes me a little queasy as I wrote that, because again, you know, being equal throughout the board, and, you know, trying not to cluster the power or whatnot, or the knowledge and all that. So I'm always trying to keep everything equal. Not that that would happen, but that's my concern.
And I have that same, there's so many things that have been brought up sometimes, and I just said, look, it just needs to come before the whole board, just, you know, it's just, so I think there's very few items really that I think,
Can we really handle
I mean,
that?
unless it's a subcommittee that we're like deciding on something to bring back to the board, or it's a, you know, it's something where we have a committee to help be part of choosing, like an RFQ or something like that, but.
Well, there's always issues that come up in a timely manner. That, you know,
Like that
comes up
letter.
the last minute, we need to send a letter to the legislature, or blah, blah, blah. And particularly if we're going to one meeting a month, that could be a long wait. And
Right.
so
That's true.
having this fallback that, you know, if it's further back from that meeting than X days, then the president and vice president or whatever could, or one of the subcommittees or whatever, would be able to approve those.
Yeah. Well, what I hear is, and that you're absolutely right in that scenario, what I'm hearing, what I think I'm hearing is probably sticking with the 2 meetings a month. We'll see how it goes in July and August. Again, we can reevaluate that. But then trying to see where we can find efficiencies, at least for now, in those meetings. We don't have a great batting average here until, I think number 3 is actually Director Lather's kind of concept there.
Yeah,
Expand.
so let's talk about that one.
Okay.
Yeah, what do
What
we
would
have to
be-
do?
What would be a limit that would make
Yeah, and you know, if
it
we
more
wanted,
efficient?
if you want to get extra protection, I don't know, I'm just throwing this out there, I don't even know if it's a good idea, it's dangerous. It could be the GM and the finance manager have to, you know, agree or something, I don't know. Just, it gives you a standard. I always like that with finances, having a check and balance.
Well, if it's already been approved in the budget,
Yeah, it's approved in the budget, okay,
then I think
yeah,
I'd be comfortable with a very high limit.
okay.
And we're looking at our purchasing policies to align them with uniform guidance, which is what oversees grant administration at the federal level. And part of that, we'll be taking a look at these limits, and we'll probably be bringing it back with some suggestions to increase those approval
Yeah,
limits.
I think we're open to it, so
Okay.
bringing it back would be a
Okay.
good idea.
Great,
Yeah, I wasn't thinking some random thing that you could just approve. It had to be in the
yeah,
budget.
in the budget, okay. Yeah, I even
So
meant with
it's
that.
basically already been approved.
Mhm.
Exactly.
It has, and maybe we report it out, but not have to come back and create a memo and make a, you know.
Right, reporting it out
It's
is
a
great.
10-minute,
Go to the
Yeah.
consent agenda. Or
yeah.
something.
And then 4, the idea around that is, could it be administerial? And the limit is just an artificial limit. It may not should be there at all. Maybe that shows some kind of artificial prejudice or something, I don't know. One thing I do know is that I know Director Daniels likes to vote no and make his voice heard. So if the board did want to go that way, is there a way just to record that? Like, if there were will serves, I'd be voting no. So you have that on record. But it would free us up, because it's actually a combination effort who puts these together. They seem easy, and they are, but it goes from Shelley to Taj, and then actually reviewed by me, and then Emma compiles them. We could report it out on a list, and something like that.
I'm fine with that.
It is reported out on the list.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, and not have to go through this process, though. So that would save us, that's a pretty, and it would have it would have helped in the situation we saw earlier.
I think it doesn't need to be 1 acre foot. I think almost all of them are less than half of an acre foot. So that'd get almost all of them.
Yeah, so,
If it's a big one, maybe it should come back to us. So.
Or putting it on a
anything.
consent agenda, is that the same thing?
And I think the main thing with the limit is, your concern is, what do we have left for offsets available
Right.
for sale?
Exactly.
And you've asked that we come back when that balance dips down to 25 acre feet. And there's also that 10 acre foot purchase limit per project. So there's checks and balances in place, and you're being informed about what projects are coming through and how much offsets they take and how they affect that balance as we go along every month. The other issue is that the process itself, the new water service will serve process and the WDO program have already been, vetted and approved by the board. And so it's really kind of a set program. And so from that standpoint, it'd be like a building permit having to go to the Board of Supervisors when, the program itself has already been defined and laid out as far as what applicants need to do. That's my pitch.
Yeah, so if there's, I think it seemed to me that's one that we could accomplish, and Director Christensen was saying, could it be consent? We did ask ourselves that question. One, then it would be need to be pulled if somebody wanted to vote no, as Director Daniels has in the past. But the other thing is, it's just writing those things and putting the figures together for the memo itself is a time sink. So that is one that if the board felt comfortable us doing it ministerially and just reporting the numbers out, you would know what's going on. You'd be informed. And always, if we have anything that's obtuse or unusual, we would bring it to you. We never,
And
Works for me.
it works for me, maybe his limit of a half an acre foot covers most every single family residence. I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, we'll make a motion at the end of going through these
Okay.
if anybody wants to
Yeah,
change
just-
anything. I want to make sure we have time
Just
for
not sure
public
about
comment too.
Why we would have a number if we.
and they want to see the bigger, the higher levels, that's why. Then, go ahead.
I think what
Number
Shelley's saying is that maybe if you say it's like residential and ADU, then you don't need a value, is that what you were asking?
But then you're treating projects
It's
differently.
equity.
Oh, okay, I
And
see.
the program's the same depending upon, whether you're a residential or commercial
Just an
applicant or,
Amount is okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Let's
so,
look at
so
5.
that's one, and,
One possible motion.
one possible motion there. Then number 5 is adopt a policy similar to the County of Santa Cruz, and Bob, help me with this one, you didn't see it.
The county.
County of Santa Cruz, allowing consent items to be pulled only at the request of board members with a public comment period for anybody in the public to address any item, so they would get 3 minutes. I think that's what the
Yeah,
county does.
it's very similar to what you do for your administrative reports.
Yeah.
Is it one comment?
Not that we have a big issue with that, but it's just a policy that could save time in the future. We could do that. And then the other, number 6, these are business meetings, and yet they're public meetings, so we strive to get public comment. So this is a way that might still achieve that and help people, just like we're striving to be more concise, help them too. Because if you think about it, 1 minute, if it's that's not necessary, is really 10, 15 minutes of people's time. Let's say there are 5 people watching television. That's 20 minutes, and most people can sum it up in 2 minutes, or if they think about it and read and prep like we do, which I think is a fair request. So that's another item, and I think the city's only allows 2. They don't even have 3. So for what that's worth. And then number 7, that is one that will help. It's all about correspondence and communication, so we could combine that. And like I said, Emma has dug into that to a little further. Did you want to elaborate on what you were thinking, or you want me to do that? What do you want?
I can elaborate on it. I found, and I spoke with legal counsel, that the majority of agencies don't actually have a separate section for written correspondence listed on the agenda. And so it really varies how they present that to the public. And from what I've seen is it's held and then available upon request via PRA. Other agencies can put a link to it on their website that says correspondence and compile it there. So there's a couple different options that you could go with on that. And I think we originally were talking about just combining oral and written and making like one item on the agenda, but that might not be the most efficient. So I think there's a couple different options that we could go with for that.
Yeah, and I think one thing that Emma pointed out that could be confusing to the public, the way we do it now, is if you get it in time, Wednesday, whatever time we designate on our guidelines, it shows up in the packet, but if you don't, then it shows up in the minutes. So it's not consistent for somebody looking. And the idea that I really like that Emma had is on our board packets, we have board packets, minutes. Now we're moving to attachments. So like if somebody gave a presentation and then didn't include it it wouldn't be in the minutes, it'd be in the attachment thing. So that makes it easier. You don't have to go to that meeting and then go to the minutes. And then there could be another column, I thought what you were saying, for correspondence, written correspondence.
Well, and there's another category, which is handouts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, somebody comes in and gives you a bunch of extraneous material that has nothing to do with their it has something to do with their presentation, but it isn't their presentation.
Yeah, so that might be written correspondence or handouts / correspondence. So it's available to the public. It saves on paper, for one, and it might be a better way to communicate this information to the public and not bog down the packets to the copy machine, us putting them in there, and it's available in one spot. So a little bit of a time saver, but more of a enhancement to the way we do things, I think. Okay.
I like the notion of, because currently in our minutes, we put all the stuff that's been presented. And I think having links to that stuff would be better.
Okay.
Because, I mean, our packet is getting bigger and bigger with all this other stuff. Often it's stuff that we've already been through. So all the presentations that are given to us about agenda items ends up in the next set of minutes.
Right, so
verbatim.
Put them in that tab
Yes.
that Emma was describing,
Yes.
or I was describing. Okay.
Because it does confuse me sometimes.
It does, it confuses us. We're like, okay, and I'm sure the public.
And why read over this thing that we've already been sitting here reading over the previous 2-week meeting?
So links.
Links?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Links to presentations done at the meeting that were not in the packet originally.
Okay, well, let's
Okay, yeah.
wait for just a minute if there's anyone that wants to comment on this item.
I want to comment on a few of these.
We do it after the
Yeah,
public
sure.
comment?
Sure.
Yeah. Public comment?
Thank you, Becky Steinbrunner. I really applaud your investigations into make better efficient use of your time, and it's a huge undertaking that you do every meeting and in between, so I appreciate all you do as directors and staff. I want to point out number 2, I think, could run into some problems with the Brown Act if there is substantial business going on between the president, vice president, and manager that is not public. That could be problematic, I think. I personally do not like the County of Santa Cruz policy that public cannot pull consent agenda items. There are many times consent agenda items that need further discussion. And right now with the county, the public can no longer pull those items for better public discussion that I think is really a valuable service not only to the members of the public, but also for members of the lead agency here. So I'm not supportive of that at all. Number 6, I'm concerned about what message that really sends to the public. I understand it's 1 minute difference, but what does 1 minute really do? And I mean, you have very poor attendance at your meetings. There are very few people that come. So how much savings in time is that actually versus the balance of what does that give the public perception as to their involvement here? I also feel that if you were to move to more workshops and special board meetings, that you have those recorded by community television, because now they're not. And in the interest of public transparency and involving the public, I think you need to really consider recording those special meetings and workshops. And I really appreciate the community television service here, because many people are watching you from home. I hear it's not 3 or 4. There are a lot of people out there. And also on your website, it's a valuable resource for later research and to refresh. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
That's what the stats say.
So, I mean, I personally like number 4, so I'll make a motion that we authorize will serves for residential, for under a half an acre foot
I'll
to be
second.
administratively dealt with, and then a summary each month.
Could I make one comment on that?
Yeah.
I did look at our categories, and we have a quarter of an acre to a half an acre that's a .516 offset.
So go a
And
little
when you
bit
do the
more.
1.6 offset, it's .82. So I didn't know if you wanted to cut the limit.
That's a good question.
I mean, leaving it
The-
at 1 acre foot?
That would basically say that any lot that's a quarter of an acre or smaller would be administered under that authority, but anything over a quarter of an acre would have to come back to you. So, I just don't know if you want to have that be the threshold. Point,
We'd also have to be
182.
clear about, construction under 1 acre foot. Does that mean that for the 1 point and then the other point?
total, I think we would
Well, I'd
shoot
have to be
for the
clear. Shoot for
total,
total,
with the
Okay.
1.6, and that's why I bring it up.
All right.
Yeah, yeah, it was meant to be. with
Okay,
one.
so
So
how
if you
can
want to
we
include
clarify
that higher bracket of a quarter of an acre to a half an acre, would be .8256 would be the total.
Well, let me say it another way. Would this accomplish what you're trying to say? Any project with whatever multiplier it has that exceeds more than 1 acre foot, we would bring back to the board.
That would be more than adequate.
Okay, I mean, it's an easier way to
I
think
think,
about it.
I would be willing to clarify the motion
I
to
was
that.
suggesting that we ask for some recommendations that, after
Yeah.
you've thought about it,
Okay.
instead
But
of
that, you mean,
voting for it right now.
really?
Yes, do, because I don't know if something else might come up. I don't know, I think,
Well-
and then we would have to change it, or I don't.
I'm gonna go ahead and stick with the motion.
I agree.
So-
Let's try it.
The motion as stated, so anything over 1 acre foot would be brought back to the board.
And that includes residential and commercial, doesn't
We're not gonna
depend.
categorize,
or
it's just
doesn't- okay.
it's an amount
And then, one other kind of
with an update every month.
clarifying question. Sometimes we get a subdivision project that's like 3 houses and it's over 1 acre foot, but so that would need
That
to
would
come
have to
back.
come back.
Okay.
So,
By that definition.
Carly, so you want to look at this in more detail to see whether
Yeah,
we have
because
the right break?
Yeah, exactly, because there are 2 goals here now we're talking about. We're streamlining meetings, but we're also making a policy change, so I don't know, it's more, it is more,
Yeah, I
more
mean,
to it than just an efficient meeting.
yeah, I mean, the thought is, providing you the same information, because it'd be reported out, but trying to reduce time. And I think the 1 acre foot, the concept behind that is that it catches probably 90% of the residential, roughly, I'm guessing. So those are the numbers. And the idea is not to, it's just to really save time. But, if you're uncomfortable and however the vote goes, we're fine with it. It's just an idea.
How about we bring all of these back in 3 months and see how they're doing, and if there are other data to change them, and, review it? Because I'd like to go ahead and do something.
So there's a motion and a second. If you want to have a second motion to bring back some of these items, maybe, like you mentioned, we're gonna look at over the summer, so maybe it wouldn't be in 3 months, maybe it'd be in longer than that, but let's stick with just this one motion for now, okay? Just to keep it clear.
Yeah, I'd be fine if we just, evaluate it afterwards. I mean, I just don't want to
So,
be meeting saying, oh, well, we should have made it.
No, it's a reasonable point.
Or like,
And it is a policy
you know,
change.
it didn't really save us any time, or.
So how about any changes that you do vote on, let's say in October, we
There you go.
reassess them and you can,
Yeah.
does
That's fine.
that sound
Yeah,
good?
We can- So let's vote on the first motion.
So the
It's
original
just-
motion was half an acre foot.
No, the motion is now anything over 1 acre foot would come back to the board.
I seconded it, so
Okay.
I'm good with 1 acre feet.
All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And then if you want to make a motion for then, or somebody that
I'll make a
any
motion,
of these policies that we approve come back in
I've got it
October.
written down.
October, we reconsider it and study how
Second.
these have gone.
Second.
Okay, so first, second.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We'll do that in
Opposed?
October.
Okay,
And I think we could increase the general manager's budget approval for items that were already approved in our budget up
But it-
to like 120,000.
I think
level?
she was going to
Bringing
come
the
back with
policy
that
Oh,
one.
back
that's
to you.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that's good to come later.
It'll
Um,
be bigger if she does it.
I personally
Don't go
want to
over
give
it.
the public the opportunity to pull consent agenda items still.
I don't really want to change 5 either. I
Yeah.
think, and I don't really want to change 6. I think that's going to be too hard to keep track of.
Okay.
I mean, I think 3 minutes.
3 minutes versus 2 minutes.
3 minutes versus, I mean, and,
Can
oh,
we-
wait, that person already did their 3 minutes, but this person didn't.
Right,
I
that'd be
mean,
hard.
Can
I
I,
think it complicates things.
yeah, can I ask a question? If it's a big meeting, like we have had packed
We have.
meetings
Yeah,
where
yeah.
we had 100 people here, I'm not,
We cut the time down to 2 minutes.
okay.
We still have the ability to do that in any,
Individual
Edit.
Back
item.
of our,
I mean,
Okay.
it's actually at the
yeah,
board
discretion.
chair's
'Cause,
discretion
I
to
mean,
do
by
that.
the time the 20th person has spoken, I've lost
there-
my concentration.
There are some meetings I wish it was 1 minute.
That may- But if you
Just-
had that many people, you
ju-
might have to.
Yeah.
Well, it was just the same comments being made over and
Over and
over
over, right.
again, and it wasn't on the agenda item.
But I think for a regular
But
thing,
I guess we have the ability to,
we do.
You also have the ability to limit public comment period to 15 minutes on any item. That, if you look at our agendas, it also
Right.
Yep.
states that.
okay.
So that might mean 1 minute per person.
That's when we have a big item and we have
Yeah.
cards and we know how many there are, then we can say, okay,
Yeah.
if we want to give a half an hour, then that
Well,
means
you
2
want to
minutes.
be, you want to be fair and give everyone a chance to
Yes,
talk.
exactly.
Yeah, that's the key.
So you have to kind of shorten the time, but we have that ability to do that still.
Yep.
I'm fine with number 7. I'm not sure what that format
Well,
would look
I
like.
think- I think what we would propose there is now, any written correspondence that come in or handouts be linked on the website, not included in the packet, whether they come in early or before the Wednesday when things are supposed to be submitted or after, they would be linked. Is that right? Is that what we were thinking? Maybe we more,
Yeah, that's what some agencies do, is that on the board meetings page of the website where it has the agenda with a link, the board packet with a link, we would do one for presentations that were at the meeting, and then one for correspondence that would have anything that was passed out during the meeting or then submitted to the board
Beforehand.
related to the meeting.
Would materials that were submitted before the date be able to be linked to the packet beforehand or no?
You could do that.
just load them up.
Like we do now?
The only thing
I mean,
would be
rather
that
than
it'd be in
printing them
multiple-
out, it'd just be linked. But I mean, if stuff does get there in time, I mean, maybe it's good for us to be able to read it.
Yeah, I mean, if it gets sent to you, all the board members, we could load it up, I assume. I mean, maybe this is an item we should try and modify or
Oh,
not.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Would
Why don't you
that-
come up with a more distinct plan for that
Okay,
one?
okay, let's do
Would
that.
that reduce the
The minutes?
minutes?
Yes.
I mean, could the minutes just be
Well,
minutes?
The minutes will be, I mean, that's another category, which we're just, I think, we were thinking we were gonna do, just in the not put presentations that are brought on a thumb drive here at the meeting, not put those in the minutes, but where online, where we have board meetings, agendas, all that, we would have a thing, presentations, not included in the board packet, boom,
Yeah,
That'd be really helpful, I think,
because
for everybody.
repeating
I
them
still
in the
think-
minutes, it was half the board packet.
Yeah.
So then we're like continuing having 400-page board
Right,
packets.
and not sure if you should look at it again and all that.
But I still think they should be linked
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
to the,
Yeah.
Yeah, they
To the
should be
packet.
available,
Yes.
yeah.
not just on the website, but also
So-
linked.
Am I an outlier here with the idea of moving the meeting around sometimes as an outreach tool?
I mean, I don't mind having workshops other places, but I think that this venue is, a benefit is it's easy to do the communication to the public for TV and, so it's expensive to set it up at the community foundation when we wanna televise or do the audio, I think.
No, this is the only place that has the automatic, the mechanism.
That's the only
to-
concern I have.
Okay, well then, I'd like to do workshops at other locations then. It's just,
It'd be fine with me.
We can still record audio, I think.
We can do audio. There's some computer capabilities. If we have that, we could do whatever is within our means. I mean, you can pay for community television. It's not live. They record it, so that's another way. You know, what I would suggest is as we get closer to a workshop, we'll think about it. And I know when we've done the community foundations, we broadcasted them live with an iPad, right? And showed the,
It wasn't pretty, but it worked.
yeah, I mean, the audio was good.
I'm not trying to create more work.
Yeah.
I'm just
It's
trying
a good
to-
idea, trying to
trying
get it.
to
Yeah. It captures the
increase
meeting.
outreach.
Okay.
Well, there is that, the Apta House golf course, that clubhouse, that
Mhm.
meeting,
Seascape.
there is,
Yeah.
I mean Seascape, sorry, what did I say? Yeah.
So how about,
Maybe a few other places.
Just
as
look-
we
look-
get toward a workshop, we'll talk to the board about where they like to hold it, that sort of thing. Does that sound good? Maybe
Okay,
if you want to make a motion, that's fine, too.
I don't need to make them.
Okay.
I think we're good,
I think it's wise.
right?
Yep.
I think, thank you for all those good suggestions.
Yeah,
Um,
and again, it's not meant to die here. If
Nope.
things come up, please, we'll bring them
And
back so they can be considered in
I
a
thi-
more formal.
We'll at least relook at the one we decided on today in
Yeah.
October, and you may have other ideas by
Yeah,
then,
yeah,
after
in
we've been
October.
through the summer as
Yeah.
far as meeting,
Well, thank
Um,
you.
The last item is written communication. Nothing from the board, any public comment on written communication? Seeing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you. See you on June 18th.